I 35M, started my own tech company with a couple of my college friends about a year ago. We've been doing great financially and are profitable right now. A few days back, my estranged parents, both 62, who hadn't spoken to me since graduation finally contacted me to ask if I'd be willing to let them come on board as partners since they wanted to invest in my business. I said no without discussing it with my friends, as everyone knew my terrible relationship with my parents, and I didn't want them involved in my business at any cost. My parents have always neglected and mocked me as a kid growing up, which was really strange because I was the kind of child that most parents would be proud of. They're both pretty well off, my dad's a dental surgeon and my mother's the CEO at a firm. I grew up in a high-achieving household, and naturally, I was very ambitious right from a young age. But I don't know why my parents were never proud of me and would make fun of me for being too nerdy. They were rich but barely contributed to my basic needs purely out of spite. I had no idea why they hated me so much until I discovered that they indirectly blamed me for not being able to reach the kind of success they'd hoped for. They were successful, but they weren't famous like they'd hoped to be. I found out about this while talking to my aunt, 46F, my dad's youngest sister and the only person who understood me, when I was 16. She told me the truth behind their unreasonable behavior and hatred for me, thinking I was old enough to know. They blamed me because they'd had to put time and money into raising me, and they believed that had they invested the same amount of time, money, and hard work in their jobs rather than me, they would have been in a much better place in their respective professions. They had me because of pressure from their families and didn't even want a kid. But now that they were stuck with me, they had to deal with me somehow, and their choice of dealing with me was to bully me and make me feel bad constantly. I was deprived of a lot of things as a kid because even though everything was technically paid for, I never had any help from my parents, not with small things like homework or projects, and definitely not with bigger things like fights at school. If I asked for anything that I didn't absolutely need, they'd just turn me away or worse, make fun of me. They'd mock my appearance, which was easy since I was pretty scrawny and nerdy looking, and if not that, they'd make fun of my affinity for computers and tell me that I'd grow up to be just an IT guy and nothing else, so investing in me was a waste of money. I was seriously emotionally neglected, and on top of that, these were the kinds of insults that I was used to growing up. At the time, I didn't see anything wrong with it and instead used to believe that there must be something wrong with me, which is why my parents didn't love me the way others loved their kids. It was pretty messed up, but for me, it was normal. In my teenage years, I started rebelling against it a little, but my dad shut it down pretty quickly and threatened to have me thrown out on the streets if I didn't behave myself. So instead, I resorted to talking about them to my aunt, who asked me 1,000 times if I wanted her to report them, but I kept saying no because I was scared of what would happen next. My aunt wouldn't be able to adopt me, and I didn't want to be a burden on anyone, so I chose to suffer at my parents' house. When I found out the reason behind my parents' behavior, I decided I was going to disappear from their lives after I was done with college. Since they didn't want me, they'd sent me to public school. I'm sorry if I sound arrogant, but I think it was a waste of my potential. That should have been enough of a hint for me to know that they didn't give a damn about my education or even me in general, but I still had some expectations from them. All those expectations went to hell when they told me that after high school ended and I turned 18, I wouldn't have a place in their home anymore until I made something of myself. Additionally, they wouldn't pay for my college tuition either. I finally snapped and told them that they couldn't do this to me because I knew I had a bright future. I'd been a straight-A student all my life, and if they kicked me out at this stage of my life, right before I was about to start college, they'd be jeopardizing my future. They were adamant and told me, "You don't even have much of a future that we can jeopardize, so quit thinking so highly of yourself." Then they told me that I shouldn't hold out much hope for a bright future because my teachers and friends had all wrongly led me to believe that I was some genius, and that some lowly IT guy who fixes computers for dummies in corporate offices was probably the highest position I'd ever be able to get. Honestly, it was a pretty ridiculous thing to say because even these allegedly lowly IT guys are pretty well versed in their own way and are equally deserving of respect, but my ignorant, disgusting parents would never understand that. I tried to argue my way into making them pay for my tuition at least. I'd worry about accommodation later, but they didn't budge. So I ran away from home a few weeks before my 18th birthday and showed up at my aunt's house. I applied to a lot of colleges with scholarships while my aunt still continued trying to persuade my parents, but with no luck. Finally, we decided that I'd attend college wherever I had the highest percentage of my tuition waived. Luckily, I got into a college with 70% scholarship, and it had a decent computer science program as well, so I was satisfied with it. My aunt decided to pay for whatever amount I needed. She's in sales and didn't earn as much as my parents back then. She was pretty middle class, but she's still my hero, and it helped that my tuition was pretty low since I was a scholarship student. I'd only come back home if it was absolutely necessary for me, and otherwise, I'd stay in my dorm because my aunt would often travel for work. That's how I planned on going through college, and my life improved once I was out of my parents' house. I was no longer worried or anxious all the time, so I felt a lot happier and was able to make friends a lot easier than I used to. That's how I met my current friends and business partners, who agreed to set up our own IT firm, and we're doing relatively well now. I thought that my parents wouldn't care what I was up to since they'd never cared back when I was in school, but when they learned I was graduating college and was valedictorian, they decided to attend the ceremony. But they couldn't enter since I didn't buy them tickets, and neither did I invite them, as we were not on speaking terms. We met after the ceremony was over, and I was very shocked to see them standing with my aunt, who looked just as annoyed as me since she'd probably had to deal with them. After the graduation ceremony, I had plans to go out drinking with my friends, but instead, I spent the next 2 hours in my parents' hotel room fighting and arguing with them. They were mad that they hadn't been invited to the graduation but my aunt had, and wanted an explanation, which was funny because, hello, they didn't let me live with them, kicked me to the streets at 18, and then told me they wouldn't pay for my tuition even when they could afford to. That, plus all the mistreatment and emotional issues they caused me throughout my childhood and well into my adulthood, I didn't think they deserved an explanation, but I didn't want them to throw a tantrum outside my college campus, so I accompanied them to the hotel before losing my temper at them. I told them that I didn't want to see them ever again, and if they tried to contact me, then I'd make sure I got a protective order or something against them. Then I left the hotel to go meet my friends. I wasn't going to let them ruin a happy day for me. After that, I didn't speak to them. I heard from my aunt later that they were disappointed and angry, but they laughed and were discussing the idea of disinheriting me, which made no difference because I didn't expect them to leave anything to me either. So that was it. It's been almost 7 years since that happened, and we haven't spoken since then. A couple of days ago, they called me out of the blue. They'd asked my aunt for my phone number, and she'd given it to them because they told her they wanted to apologize. She told me that she'd wanted to alert me about it, but she'd forgotten, and I get it, she's busy nowadays, so it's fine. But they didn't apologize for anything and went straight to the business proposition because now investing in me is profitable to them as compared to all those years ago. I obviously declined, hung up, and then blocked them. I told my friends about it as well, but they didn't mind me declining without consulting with them first because they knew about my personal history with my parents. I didn't know what else to expect afterward, but the very next day, they hit back by tagging me and all my buddies in a scathing Facebook post where they were talking about how I was not the self-made computer whiz that I made myself out to be, but just a guy with daddy's money, who had succeeded in creating a moderately successful business all because of his parents, but now I was refusing to acknowledge the help they'd given me all through these years. I was dumbstruck at the post, and I almost called them up to tell them off, but before any of that, I decided to get back at them with something I'd kept to myself for years. I had a couple of old videos of them from when I was a teenager and still used to live with them, where I was documenting every day of my life living with my parents just in case I'd ever need to prove in court or whatever that they were terrible parents. I never posted it because I didn't want anything to do with them, and if I posted these videos of them being rude to me, making fun of me, and acting like I was the worst thing that could have happened to mankind, then there would surely be repercussions for it back then. I just didn't want any drama, so I let it go. However, this Facebook post of theirs changed everything, and I finally posted those videos. I used my public profile on Instagram, wrote long captions explaining my history with my parents, and then uploaded the videos to call them out. After that was done, I called my lawyer and filled her in on whatever was going on, but she was already a step ahead and had started the paperwork to file a defamation lawsuit against my parents for what they'd done. I was about to get in touch with my co-partners as well to ask them if they'd be fine with this lawsuit since their names had been dragged into the Facebook post as well. There were already a couple of comments on their post from a few of my relatives and some friends of my parents saying that it's great that I'd finally been exposed, and that they'd never work with us, so we definitely had grounds to sue. I also sent those screenshots to my attorney for future use and told my business partners about it as well so they'd be in the loop. Once that was all done, I waited for them to call me begging for forgiveness, and they did call me from my aunt's number a few days later, but they called me demanding an apology and saying that I'd screwed up by posting those videos because while they posted their rant about me on their personal accounts on Facebook, which meant only a few people would see it, I posted it on my public profile, and a lot more people were going to see that since I had a significant number of followers. They told me that I needed to take that post down as soon as possible because people had already started messaging them with hateful stuff, and some were even threatening them. This could all effectively end both their careers since they didn't come off well in the videos I posted, and if their employers saw these posts, then they'd be screwed. I got a little defensive there and told them that they deserved this, and then hung up, but I did archive those posts and turned off my phone for a while. When I finally got back to my phone after a couple of hours, my parents sent me an email stating that they were apologetic for everything that had happened in the past, but also mentioned that what I'd done in retaliation was awful. Besides, I posted personal videos that featured them without their consent, and that was grounds for them to sue as well, apparently. I guess they'd been served with the defamation suit, so they told me that I needed to take it back, or else they wouldn't hesitate to talk about how unethical I'd been, and that would certainly negatively impact my business. I've discussed this with my business partners, and they really don't think there's any reason for us to back down from the suit because they think we did things the right way, unlike those who lied and presented distorted facts just to make me look like a liar and take away my credibility. They have a point, but for some reason, I still feel guilty going through with it because they have apologized in the email, and I know that this suit is going to be bad for all of us in one way or another because of all the negativity attached to it. I don't understand what to do right now. AITA for suing my parents for defamation even though they apologized to me? Update 1, hey, everyone, writing here to update on the situation with my parents and the defamation lawsuit. After reading through all your comments supporting my decision to stand up against my parents, I've decided to go through with the lawsuit for several reasons. First of all, it wasn't my decision alone anyway, since my business partners were also involved. Even though their Facebook post wasn't as widely viewed as my Instagram response when I uploaded it, enough people still saw it, and it really could have affected our business. Their intent was clearly to negatively publicize my character and firm so they could get some sort of ego boost from ruining my life's work, so pursuing the defamation case makes perfect sense. Besides, their so-called apology doesn't mean much when they only offered it after realizing their own careers were at stake. They didn't mean it, they just said they were sorry for the sake of damage control. Our lawyer pointed out that their email actually strengthens our case, as it shows they were aware of the potential damage their false statements could cause. Something really interesting happened yesterday. One of my former high school teachers reached out after seeing my Instagram posts. She told me she remembers how my parents would never show up for parent-teacher conferences, even when specifically requested to discuss my advanced placement opportunities. She's offered to provide a written statement about their pattern of educational neglect, which our lawyer says could be valuable supporting evidence. The most surprising development came from my mother's workplace. Apparently, some of her colleagues have privately reached out to express their support for me. It turns out she's been taking credit for my company's innovations in her industry circles, claiming she mentored me from the start. The hypocrisy is astounding. First they post about how I'm not really successful, then I find out they've been using my success to boost their own reputation. My aunt has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's been collecting old emails and messages from when she tried to convince my parents to support my education. There's a particularly damning email chain where my father explicitly states that wasting money on his computer obsession would only encourage him to become more of a disappointment. The lawyer says this kind of documented history of their attitude toward my education directly contradicts their public claims about supporting my career. My business partners are standing firm with me. In fact, they've shared some interesting insights about how my parents' false claims have already impacted some of our ongoing negotiations. 2 potential clients have reached out asking for clarification about our company's founding and funding, directly referencing my parents' posts. This is exactly the kind of tangible damage to our business interests that strengthens our defamation case. The most validating moment came when one of our company's earliest investors made a public LinkedIn post defending me. Without any prompting from us, they detailed how we bootstrapped the company from scratch, describing the long nights and weekend work we put in during our first year. They even shared screenshots of our initial business plan presentation from 3 years ago, which clearly shows we built this company without any family money or connections. My parents' attempts to intimidate me with their own legal threats have completely backfired. Our lawyer actually laughed when she read their email about suing me for posting the videos. Since they were recorded in common areas of their house during times they knew I was recording, they even acknowledged the camera in some clips, and given that they document abusive behavior, their consent argument is extremely weak. Plus, as my lawyer pointed out, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Those videos simply show them behaving exactly as they did. The outpouring of support from the tech community has been overwhelming. Several successful founders who faced similar family situations have reached out to share their stories and offer their support. One even offered to connect us with their PR team to help manage the public narrative if things escalate further. The legal process is moving forward steadily. We've documented over 40 instances of my parents making false statements about my company's funding and success. The subpoenas for their communication records are being prepared, which should reveal the full extent of their campaign to damage my reputation. I used to be scared of my parents even as an adult closing in on 35, but this whole situation has helped me finally break free from that fear. It was so deeply rooted that I didn't even realize it was fear until many of you pointed out how many times I'd had the opportunity to tell people the truth about my parents in the past but didn't do so on purpose because I was afraid of what might happen. The thing is, now I know nothing can happen to me. I'm the one in control now, and they really can't touch me. I'm going to see this lawsuit through, regardless of their half-hearted apology, which was pretty self-serving to begin with. My parents were downright cruel to me, and no child deserves to grow up in a house like that. So now that I have the chance to hold them accountable in my own way, I definitely will do it. I've always tried to be the bigger person, but I don't see any reason to continue that when they keep attacking me just because they want their spot in the limelight. It's disgusting, and I won't stand for it anymore. Not when I finally have the means and support to fight back. I'll update again when we have the first mediation session scheduled. Thank you all for helping me see this situation clearly. Update 2. I need to share what happened today with my aunt and the latest developments in the lawsuit situation. My aunt contacted me to ask what I decided to do, and when I told her we were proceeding with the lawsuit, she surprised me with her response. She revealed that my parents had been pressuring her intensely since the Instagram videos went viral. They've been calling her multiple times daily, alternating between threatening to cut her off from the family and begging her to make me see reason. But instead of giving in, she told them something that made me incredibly proud. She said she would testify about everything she witnessed during my childhood if the case goes to court. The mediation date has been set for next week. Our lawyer says my parents' legal team has been frantically trying to negotiate a settlement before then. They've offered to make a public retraction of their Facebook post and issue a formal apology, but they want me to take down the Instagram videos permanently in exchange. More revelations have come to light about my parents' recent behavior. Apparently, they've been telling different stories to different people. To their colleagues, they claim they've been secretly supporting my business from the beginning. To family members, they're playing the victims of an ungrateful son. To their lawyer, they're presenting themselves as concerned parents who were just trying to protect me from making mistakes. The most interesting development came from an unexpected source. One of my father's former dental partners reached out to my lawyer. He had documentation showing how my father had actively sabotaged a small scholarship I was supposed to receive from their practice's community fund when I was heading to college. My father had told everyone I'd declined it, but in reality, he had withdrawn my application without my knowledge. My business partners have been amazing through all of this. They've started documenting every single business opportunity or partnership that's been affected by my parents' claims. We've already identified several deals that stalled or fell through after my parents' Facebook post, which strengthens our case significantly. Our lawyer says we're in an incredibly strong position. The combination of the childhood videos, my aunt's testimony, the scholarship documentation, and the clear evidence of business damage makes our case nearly bulletproof. She's advised us not to accept any settlement that doesn't include full compensation for the business damages and a legally binding agreement preventing my parents from making any future statements about me or my company. My parents tried to counter with their own legal threats again, this time claiming emotional distress from the public exposure. But their argument fell apart when our lawyer pointed out that they were the ones who initiated the public discussion of our relationship with their Facebook post. Their lawyer has apparently advised them to stop making public statements altogether. I've archived the Instagram videos for now, not because of their demands, but because we have enough evidence preserved for legal purposes. My aunt says this shows I'm still the better person, but honestly, I just don't want them to have any new ammunition to use against us in court. The family has split into two camps. Most of the older generation is backing my parents, claiming family matters should stay private. But surprisingly, several of my younger cousins have reached out to share similar stories of emotional manipulation from my parents. It seems I wasn't the only one they tried to control, just the only one who kept receipts. My business partners and I have decided to go into this mediation ready for war. We're not backing down, and we're not accepting any settlement that doesn't include full accountability. As my aunt says, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Update 3, well, the court-authorized mediation session finally happened today, and things went exactly as explosive as you might expect. Let me share what went down. When we walked into the mediation room, my parents tried to play the dignified professional card they've perfected over the years. My father in his expensive suit, my mother in her CEO power outfit, but their facade cracked the moment our lawyer started presenting the documented timeline of their social media attacks and our evidence. The mediator was particularly interested in the mounting business losses we could directly trace to their Facebook posts. We presented 3 canceled contracts and 2 withdrawn partnership offers, all explicitly citing the uncertain background of our company's founding. That's when my father completely lost his composure. He started shouting that I was trying to destroy everything they built, and that I was just proving what an ungrateful son I've always been. The mediator had to call a brief recess just to get him to calm down. During the break, they called me from a different room, thinking they could still manipulate me one-on-one like they used to. My mother tried her old tactics, crying about how I was breaking her heart and ruining their reputation. My father switched between threats and attempts at guilt tripping. But something was different this time. I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, no need to please them. I simply walked out and told the mediator I'd only communicate through our lawyers from that point forward. Their lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable as we presented more evidence. The documentation from my father's former dental partner about the sabotage scholarship seemed to particularly unsettle him. He kept whispering to my parents, probably trying to make them understand their position wasn't as strong as they thought. The most satisfying moment came when our lawyer played one of the videos I'd saved. It showed my father mocking my computer science projects at a family gathering, loudly proclaiming that I'd never amount to anything in that field. The mediator's expression said it all. Their claims of having supported my career were completely destroyed. My business partners testified about the real story of our company's founding, bringing detailed financial records showing every penny of our startup capital came from our own savings and small investor rounds, not a cent from my parents. Their faces when we presented the proof of my mother taking credit for my success in her professional circles were priceless. By the end of the session, their lawyer was practically begging for a settlement. They're now facing not just the defamation suit, but potential professional consequences as their employers have caught wind of their behavior. The mediator has given them 48 hours to accept our terms or we proceed to court. Our terms are non-negotiable: a public retraction of all false statements, compensation for business damages, and a legally binding agreement to never contact me or make any statements about me or my company again. Their careers might take a hit, but as my aunt said, they built their success on appearing perfect while tearing others down. Maybe it's time for reality to catch up with them. I'm finally free of the fear they held over me for so long. Their power was always about emotional manipulation, and now that I can see through it, they have nothing left to threaten me with. My business partners are standing strong with me, our company is doing better than ever, and for the first time in my life, I'm not worried about what my parents might do or say. The mediator expects their response tomorrow. Either way, I've won, not just the legal battle, but my freedom from their control. Sometimes justice takes years, but when it comes, it's absolutely sweet. I'll update if anything significant happens with their response, but honestly, I'm done letting them take up space in my life. It's time to focus on the future and the family I've chosen, my aunt, my business partners, and the friends who've stood by me through all of this. Thank you everyone for your amazing support and advice throughout this journey. Your comments helped me see things clearly and gave me the strength to stand up for myself. Justice has been served, and I'm finally free to focus on my future with people who truly care about me.